Morning, Andrew here again, and this is episode 173. And before we move on from where we were in our last episode, I want to consider just briefly the last part of the text, the section that we looked at in that episode. So I'm going to read the whole. It's a very short piece. We're in Matthew chapter 24, verses 3 to 8, and Jesus is talking about the end. He's talking about the eschatological future. What is going to happen that will in the end result in his returning. So we pick up the narrative in Matthew 24 verses 3 to 8. As I said, this is probably towards the end of Holy Week as he's facing his own trial. One of the hardest moments of his life. So when Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, in verse 3 of chapter 24, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will this be? When will this be when the temple will be destroyed, when there will be no two stones standing one upon another, when it will all be thrown down? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "Beware that no one lead you astray. For many will come in my name, saying that I am the Messiah, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of birth pangs." So yesterday we considered the first part, those coming claiming to be the Messiah. And we looked at the way in which we have seen that played out down through history and how we see it happening even in our own day as we look at the political milieu in which we find ourselves, and ask to consider who are the ones who claim that they have all the answers. Who are the ones that claim that they are the only ones who can save us, who can deliver us, that can bring us into the promised land, and that all the others are pretenders. They're all people who will lead you to destruction. You kind of get the picture. Today we're picking up the last part. You will hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All this is but the beginning of birth pangs. Well, in the nearly 2,000 years when Jesus uttered these words, when has what he just said here not been true? There have been wars, rumours of wars, famines, earthquakes, natural disasters throughout the whole time. And it's been increasingly of late. Now, some of us would say that it's a consequence of global warming, while others who would deny that say it's just a normal part of the cycle of weather and historic events. The thing is, though, that it has always been part of our life. It's always part of our experience here in Christchurch. As I said before, we've been through a bit over the last 10 years. 10 years ago we had earthquakes which did huge damage and killed 185 people. A year or so back we had a massacre at mosques which killed I think 51 and injured a whole lot more. It was shocking. In little Christchurch, this little middle-class city in the middle of New Zealand, pretty monocultural, would you not expect those things to happen? And yet it's part of life as we've experienced it. And now we have COVID, this worldwide epidemic, reminding us how fragile we are, reminding us ultimately how powerless we are, and reminding us that we live in a world where increased specialization, which has given us the lifestyles to which we've been accustomed. The lifestyle that allows me to talk into a camera and then load it up to a thing in the cloud called YouTube, so that you can sit wherever you are watching it at any time that you choose. We have this technology, which means there's increased specialization, but it also makes us vulnerable, because it helps us to because we need to recognize how interdependent and how interconnected we are. We become a world that is like that, and it doesn't take much to actually throw a spanner in the works so that the whole thing just collapses and crashes down around us. So we're living in very interesting times and also very challenging times. I want to suggest, though, that it has not been different probably at any other time down through the history of the church and of the world for the last 2,000 years. We've got COVID. Down through the history of the last 2,000 years have been terrible plagues that have taken out over a third, up to a half of the population of the world. There's been shocking things that have happened. That actually every generation has faced its own particular set of challenges. That the threat of war is always a present reality. It's part of our fallen condition, that there are always times when crops have failed. There have always been times when we've had earthquakes, as we well know, and times when huge weather events have done huge damage. As I said, there's nothing new in any of this, but it's useful. In the Middle Ages, I'd read somewhere that churches fell into disrepair because they had such a strong expectation that Jesus was coming back any day now. And this is the whole point. Every generation sees the same signs. Every generation sees signs of both despair and of hope. Every generation clings to the hope that today could be the day that Jesus returns. Every generation has had this hope. My dad, he died 13 years ago. As I was growing up, he was convinced that Jesus was going to return in his lifetime. Didn't happen. Certainly in my lifetime, he was sure of it. He would look at things like the miracle of the Jews, the way in which the Jewish nation had survived through the last 2,000 years, through some of the most horrific persecutions and dislocations, yet they'd remained a kind of connected, integrated unity even through all of that. He was convinced by their return, particularly in 1948, to the land of Palestine, to the land of Israel, the sense of the re-establishment of the nation of Israel. He saw these signs that Jesus is coming back at any time. Well, 70 years has passed, and here we are. We're still waiting. It could happen at any time. And what I think the important thing is that I'm wanting to stress is that every generation needs to have a sense of expectancy that today could be the day. I know how important it was for me, particularly as a teenager, as one growing into adulthood, and as a young adult moving through into my 20s and towards my 30s. The thought that Jesus could be coming back today was often the one thing that kept me on a sort of semi-even keel. The possibility that the struggle that I was having with my own anxiety issues in life was going to end because Jesus was going to gloriously call me home and that it would all be over. It was what kept me going. I don't know what might have happened or where it might have been without that hope to hang on to, without that sense that today could be the day, the reality, the urgency of today could be the day that Jesus comes back. Today could be the day, and today could be the day. It could be, still could be. For each one of us, today could be the day. One of the things I just want to observe as I close for today is one of the things that Jesus says that I think is really quite interesting. Well, he says a lot of things that are really interesting, but this thing in relation to this. He says, because the Son of Man will come at a day when you least expect him. As I look at the state of the church in this country and perhaps worldwide, my sense is that of all the years that I've lived in, that I've been aware of, the sense of expectancy of the return of Christ has never been lower than it is today. Never been lower, and perhaps that's a sign of hope. That it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be at any second now that he returns. Because he's going to come at a time when we least expect him. Hey, oh well, I hope that's helpful. God bless you.